Welcome to today's Social System Mapping OnRamp session, July 12th, 2021, with your hosts, Christine Capper and Kara Martiner of Greater Than the Sum. And I'm just going to show these, the upcoming schedule of sessions, but I'm not going to read through them. And Kara will be posting in the chat links to a whole bunch of resources we have. So if you're watching this on video, hey, I just thought, Kara, we should be putting those links in the, I don't know if we are. Okay, moving on. And today's agenda, we're gonna, in fact, have any of you not met yet? I think you all know each other. Okay, well, we can do chat intros, but it's dawning on me that maybe what we should do rather than intros with your network is something different. I'll contemplate that for just a second. Then Ben's going to share his map and some of the some new stuff that he's done with it. Then we're going to have questions and answers, and then we'll have the optional post-session half hour, which Ben will not stick around for, but Kara and I will. So let's, who's got a good quick check-in for chat that would be appropriate? Joe, you do it.
One. If you were walking into house on fire situation, what are the 3 things you would grab?
Oh, okay.
Cool. That's because you cannot have time. Come on, house on fire situation. I'm gonna grab my passport, my rosary that I have for my meditation, and number 3 is phone.
Okay. Okay. So with that, I think that's interesting. The phone is the most common thing. I don't have a lot of stuff that matters much to me. Like I think about this every once in a while. Like, okay, house on fire, what do I grab? And I'm like, if I can communicate with the rest of the world, and I've got some clothes on, if it's cold out, and my husband and my son aren't trapped in the house, I'm good. Like, whatever. But I think about that pretty frequently. Okay, things like that. So let's, with that, thank you, Joe, for that one. Let's hand it over to, I'm gonna stop sharing. I stopped sharing. Okay, so Ben, take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me here again. Good to see all of you, most of whom I have, I think, all familiar faces and names. Some of you I know better than others, but and greetings to anyone watching this in a recording. This is a map that I made as part of a gig I had supporting an open space technology dialogue event. So a lot of my work centers on convening dialogue conversations, and this was an initiative from the Alaska Humanities Forum, a nonprofit in that state, that had been doing an ongoing series of inquiries around what they call community, media, and possibility. What happens when community and media connect, connecting up community organizers and different players in the media ecosystem. And it was culminating with 2 open space sessions in mid-April. And I was brought on to facilitate or help run the tech and co-facilitate the open space. But because one of the core goals of this whole enterprise was to build a network that connected up community level activists, organizers, just anybody that cares about their local communities with the media, as well as with sort of alternative media players, I said, maybe a map would be a good idea. And they liked the idea, they loved it. And so that's what got created. And I'll just take you on sort of a quick tour. This was the registration form for the event. And so it has a bit of a description, but what's maybe most relevant here is that in the registration, we said we're creating this map. We linked to Greater Than the Sum's website. We also had a link to see the map. People were registering on an ongoing basis. Interesting, that's not a hot link. Oh, maybe it is here. And we asked, do you want to be included in it or not? And if they said yes, then we grabbed all the data that they had put in here and put it onto the map. So this got them automatically onto the map even before they went to their own survey and filled things out. When they came to the survey, I don't want to go through a ton of stuff here, but the one thing I do want to highlight is in the connections tab, right? Well, so you all know this, but for anybody watching, there's a bunch of different tabs in the sumApp interface to put your data in for what will be shown on the map. The connections option is one of the things that makes sumApp so special. And I did something that's a little different here in that I gave people two different ways or kinds of connections to show. So basic connection, this is pretty standard. How well do you know somebody? We gave them 3 options, but then we also wanted to track how much this event was growing the network. So you could check off boxes in both of these cases. And these were the 4 options we gave them in terms of, we had to call it new and old connections. It was a little tricky to say. On the one hand, you could say you want to meet somebody, but also that you met during the event, or to the extent this was going to be an ongoing tool for this emerging network, you could say you met afterwards, or you could say it strengthened your connection. And so then when you come to the map now, here's the main view of the map, and we have 2 views. People would come initially to the main map view that shows strength of connection, and then the other data that we collected in the survey. For example, these different roles that people play within the media ecosystem, which we also illustrated with the segments around there, the colored segments. And then it would show the strength of connections, just with the thickness of the line between the different people in the event. And so this was a nice resource for people to use both before the event, potentially even during it. If you got into a breakout, you could have this map open and you could click on somebody and see a little bit about them. And then the goal was for it to be used afterwards to help build the network. That didn't actually happen that much, and I don't think that had anything to do with the technology and the map itself. It had more to do with the lack of a core group that was really committed to stewarding this network and using the map as a tool on an ongoing basis. There was a hope that would emerge as a result of this dialogue, but that didn't happen for other reasons. Anyway, so this is a fairly standard view. What really excited me about this map, particularly as a convener of dialogue, was to see this view. It's a little bit hard to track with the color differences, but we got the I would like to meet you is in yellow, orange is that strengthened, or brown strengthened our relationship, green, or I guess we know it's gray. We don't have any of those. I think we met after and we met during, and you can filter by these, so we can just see who said I would like to meet you as a result of filling out this survey. And then at least one person we see as green here, or maybe 2, which meant that they actually then did meet as a result of that request. But you can also see the people whose relationships were strengthened, or the ones that met in the event. So a lot of those. And the assumption is that this is probably 1/10 of what actually happened. But it's really nice to get this overall picture of how an engagement like this, which really was just 2-3 hour sessions on a Saturday and a Sunday in afternoon in April, which turned out also to be really nice days in Alaska, and everybody was getting out of winter hibernation. So the events weren't as well attended as they'd hoped. But that's kind of the main thing I want to say, other than to thank Christine and Tim. Tim especially was super helpful in getting some of this stood up with just some of the technical questions. But having worked with Jim on the Now What map going back a couple of years ago and going through different iterations of that, this was a map. This was like the first map where I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I think I'm good enough that I can take the lead and get it going, get it set up. I didn't leave myself very much time to do it. I was a little nervous in the end that I had made gotten myself in a mess. But with, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours maybe of Tim's time here and there on a couple of different calls, everything got set up. So I really, his support was absolutely crucial and really surgical, between just, chatting on Slack, but also a couple of live sessions. And to me, it was a prototyping of something that I think has a lot of potential in the future. Particularly, I really do think there's something about this tracking the way that relationships grow and develop, and that you need 2 different data types for that. That in the Now What map, we kind of mush it all together. So you can say I met somebody during Now What, or I'd like to meet you, but it's the same set of questions that also includes how well you know somebody, and that's just kind of messy. And since it would be a ton of work now with 600-700 people in that map to sort of pull that data apart. But I learned from that. So in this iteration, we said, oh, these have to be separate things, separate views, etc. Questions, thoughts?
Well, just to comment on your appreciation of Tim. Tim commented when the process was going on, he said, Ben has gotten really good at this. He really knows what he's doing now. So he's learned a lot. So
Thanks to you all. Kumu was very helpful too on the Kumu Slack. There were a couple of things where I got some help from them. One other thing I was going to mention is that I created 2 video tutorials for the participants in the event. One to help them get their information onto the map, and another to use it. And I think those were important for onboarding a bunch of people who were otherwise might have been intimidated by this a little bit.
Hello, Mauricio.
Link to in the map info on the main view.
Yeah, sorry, butt it in. Just hello, Mauricio. Welcome. I don't know if how your bandwidth is doing today, but I just want to acknowledge that you just came in. Hi, I'm seeing you in chat. And everybody here is a fairly experienced or familiar with social system maps, and Ben just mostly went through what he did differently. So he's already done with that. But maybe do you want to just go back and show Mauricio what you did in like the connection questions, those 2 views quickly? Does anybody mind if we give him Mauricio? Yay. Okay.
And to answer that question about the videos, so they're right here in the main map view, the links to those. I think, did we put the link to the map in the chat yet? Kara's got that. Yeah, so they're just right here.
Yeah, but will you put it, sorry, okay, you did put it again, so Mauricio has it. Okay, sorry to butt in.
So it just, it talked about the map views, using the map. Here was the link to get you into the sumApp system also. So I use this sideboard to not just orient people to the map, but get them a little more plugged in. And then it talks about filtering and things like that. Yeah, so so this was a map, Mauricio, that was related to a conversation event, an open space event organized by the Alaska Humanities Forum called Community, Media, and Possibility. And we wanted to map the participants in the event to help them get to know who was coming beforehand, show some of the nature of the connections, and also to have this be a tool for a network to emerge out of the conversational event. And it has 2 different views. The main view shows the strength of people's connections. So the difference here are the connections. And here it's showing how well people know each other with the thickness of the lines. And here it shows what happened as a result of the event. So there's 3-4 different kinds of connections it maps. The yellow are people saying they want to meet somebody. The green are people saying I met them through this event. The brown are people who knew each other beforehand, but whose relationships were strengthened as a result of it. And that's a little bit of for me, that was an experiment to show these 2 different kinds of things, and to particularly for a dialogic process like this, to be able to collect data on how gathering people to talk about something they care about builds relationships and connections, and to visualize that I've been convening dialogue for 11 years, and I've never had this visual before. So it was really exciting to see that. And I think what you see here is probably, a 1/10 of what actually happened, just because it's hard to get everybody to get into the system and add their info or update it once it's there, etc. And here's just what a typical profile looks like. So you're collecting a lot of good information about, that the participants in the event would be able to use to get a sense of who these people are and are they valuable. how is it useful for me to connect to them? Or some people wrote a lot.
Would you just briefly show him the connection options, the way you set that up?
Yes. So this is if you're into the sumApp interface to add your info to the map. The connections tab is where you create all those different lines and you pick somebody, and there were 2 different questions, one for each of those views on the map. So this is the one that showed the strength of connection, the different thicknesses of the turquoise lines, and this is the one that showed the red, the green, the yellow, whichever one you checked off. And you could check off more than one actually here.
Oh, cool.
Just choose one, but people I think chose more than one anyway. There was some reason why I decided to make that possible, but I can't remember now because this was made back in April.
Thank you for giving Mauricio a glimpse of your map. So I see Mary's putting questions into the chat, and feel free to just say, I mean, we've got plenty of time. This is a very open session today, so feel free to say them out loud. And I'm going to mute myself and sit my desk down while Mary, you can ask Ben your questions. If you
Okay. I was part of doing a map for a conference track, and looking back at it, I realized I wasn't facilitating the track, but how valuable the map would have been in terms of planning the facilitation. So I'm wondering your experience with that, whether the map helped you in terms of facilitation, and secondly, if you included the map in the sessions.
We did showcase the map in the 2 sessions. Just showing people, here's who's here, who's interested in this, and here's the kind of information, and encouraging them to go back to the map and update it if they met somebody or they wanted to connect with somebody further, and to help visualize this emerging network. In terms of the planning of the event, I mean, it was certainly part of our conversation about how to do the registration, and we had to coordinate things to make sure that as people were registering, they understood that the map was an option, and to encourage them after they registered, if they didn't update their profile, or add more to their profile, like a picture, etc. There was some work involved in encouraging people to put themselves on the map. But I don't think that, well, for one thing, open space is a process where the participants name the topics for their sessions.
Right, I forgot.
So
yeah.
Maybe if we had a different process, we might have actually proactively tried to use that data and integrate it to, tell some kind of story. I mean, there certainly could have been things one could do. And that's a really fascinating question. If you were designing a process that integrated a map for a group, what might that look like?
Yeah, I forgot about the open space, and yeah, I do have a curiosity about what could happen rather than a pre-programmed facilitation, how mapping would influence something.
And I imagine even in open space, you could encourage people to look at who's coming. And that was another thing I don't think I pointed out, but because there were 2 different sessions, you could actually filter by which sessions people said they were planning to attend also, and see that information. So in theory, you might say, oh, these kinds of people are going to be here, and therefore this kind of a conversation is possible as a participant, and think in advance. I don't know if anyone did that or not. But,
Yeah, I was just wondering if you, just in thinking about the process, I was thinking, I wonder what would happen if you asked a question like, in this, given that this is open space, what kinds of topics would you be interested in either hosting or attending? And just like as a, like to get people thinking about it, and then maybe even, being something like it.
there's a there are two very distinct schools of thought within the open space community on that. And I was working with someone who's pretty firmly in the camp of you don't want to invite people to declare topics beforehand at all. You want to come into it with a real clean slate. That's part of the magic of the process.
Yeah.
And so even having people start to think about, I mean, I agree. There's some kind of way to have your cake and eat it too there, and a map could be an interesting tool for that.
Yeah. Other questions?
My other question was, what was the response from other people?
People loved the map. They were really excited by it. They thought it was super cool. And, the ultimate reason we put all this time and effort into it was to support an ongoing, network to emerge. And as far as I know, that hasn't happened. I kind of figure I would have gotten more, I would have gotten some inquiries and things about it if people were really actively using it still. I probably, I thought to check back with the forum folks to just see what their story is about how much continued to happen. But I know part of the issue there is that they didn't have a mandate to steward this network on an ongoing basis. Their funding was for the event or this whole series of events that this was the culmination for.
Yeah, that was what my experience was as well, that there were people responsible for the conference track, but not beyond that. And so even though we did some work on the mapping end, there wasn't someone to steward that.
Yeah. Rebecca, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking about the I would like to meet this person element, and speculating that the way people found out who wanted to meet them was by looking at the map. Right? Okay. Yeah, and then I think we've all been thinking about how much brokerage it takes to get people into using this, whether it's the technology per se, like none of us is really focused on that. It's just a means to an end, but, and so I do tend to like asking people, what do you have to give and what do you want to get? Maybe because I have a very instrumental approach to relationships, and don't come from the open space community. And I was thinking, if people listed any of those, then a broker might help people see connections they otherwise weren't seeing. That I would like to meet someone, I think, is premised on that person recognizing that the other person is something that he or she could use. And so yeah, those were my not particularly well-formed thoughts. Again, trying to figure out, like, with how simply can we get people to connect and then keep using.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that it's not like the system sends a notice out to you if somebody points an arrow to you on the map and says, I want to meet you. You've got to go in and look at, who's connecting to you and see that. It would have been, in retrospect, a good place to include, the text field about your story about this connection too. So if you want to meet somebody, say a little bit about why, right? And I think your point about what you call a broker, or I might, others might say refer to as a network weaver. I think that's really spot on. That we're at a point with this technology where you need a group of people who are really skilled at using it to bring it alive for the larger network. And that's ongoing work. It's different from creating the map and helping people to get on the map and use it. It's a relational piece, and I think it's crucial. And there's so many people that are interested in network weaving, but I think we're still the metaphor I use is if you know, if we were a symphony orchestra or a jazz band, it's like we just got all these instruments and we're kind of learning how to make some decent notes on them, and you know, tones and scales, maybe some simple songs. You know, but maybe now that's been going on for like 10 years. And maybe we're getting to the point where we can start to actually play some pretty sophisticated jazz, or people could compose symphonies that could be performed. But that's a transition. I feel like we're sort of, there's a tipping point that maybe we're going to get to. But right now, so many people are still a little, I mean, they're willing to engage with the technology more, but it's still so new. And they're also spoiled by so much stuff, like this idea that I have to go to the map to see if somebody wants to meet me. What, you won't tell me? You won't send me an email? It's like, how hard is it really to do that? You know, if you care about this group, it's really not hard. You know, and there's a 3-minute video you can watch that'll teach you. And there's this guy you can send an email to if you need help. But even those little hurdles, sometimes people just think I shouldn't have to do that, which is interesting.
Can I ask a follow-on question? This idea of network weaving. So I think you were talking about brokering between offers and asks, I think there, Rebecca. And there's this other, you know, fully distributed thing where people can like just close triads, you know, where you're like, I know who you guys should talk and I will introduce you. But your experience, Ben, especially in Now What, of noticing interest groups or identity groups, and then having someone, a network weaver, actually convene that group. What are your thoughts about the effectiveness of that? So rather than relying on people to self-organize, because it really doesn't happen a lot, just set somebody's roles. They go like, I'm going to pull this together.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's started to work really well in the last edition of Now What. And a key thing there was that I created a map view that let the people who wanted to organize groups see who wanted to be in them. So we had a sort of a separate class of groups that were more kind of invitation based versus, you know, here's an engagement and here's an invitation that anybody can come to. Being able to see that information made it much easier to organize those groups. I mean, you and Christine were both part of the Systems of Thriving group, and I got inspired to create that because I made this view and I saw who was there, who said they want to be part of this. Mm-hmm. And I think it was, you know, 2 people in particular that I knew were really interested in systems thinking and thrivability. I'm like, oh, there's a pattern here. Who else do I know? And you know, we had a really great set of 4 sessions as a result of that.
But the distinction was invitation versus broadcast. Like
right. Yeah.
Open space saying, hey, anybody wants to show up,
right,
as opposed to you like inviting.
Right. Right. I mean, the broadcast stuff works for other kinds of things too, but I think there were people that showed up for that because they were personally invited too, right? Who probably wouldn't have showed up for a conversation on Systems of Thriving, like Christine and you.
Yeah.
So with all these potential connections that we're all talking about, you know, people getting together and finding it, it seems like there is the potential, the opportunity for some really good social innovation to come out of it. Because you introduced me to this person, we came up with this great idea. But it also seems it's kind of hard to capture that. I mean, most of the time it's this guy knows that guy and you know him and you like him, whatever type of thing. But to come up with a really new idea and then broadcast that, a lot of times it seems like it's going to be lost. And it's just going to be without whatever 3 people came up with the idea. So it'd be really nice if we could figure out some way of saying, hey, that idea, here it is, and then it gets passed around, or at least people can find it later on. I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, well, and you know, with level 4 in sumApp, you can have 2 different classes of element that you map. One of those classes could be ideas. It was designed to be more organizations, but you know, the idea that these maps can connect up lots of different things, not just people.
Yeah.
So is it 2 or can I have more than 2 I can map? Because I've got a lot.
Well, so right now it's 2, and the just want to distinguish between a thing that we're going to get to once we get the new survey built again. So right now the 2 that now in the dual elements, there's two, and our sort of way of designing it was that they each have a kind of agency. So
Okay.
you could use them for things that don't have agency, but it's designed to actually take advantage of two different types of agentic
Right.
nodes in the network. Once we get the new survey built, then what we want to do is add a matrix question that enables you to have so you could have ideas and you could say, I have different kind, like, I hate this idea, I love this idea,
Okay.
or just, I'm curious about this idea. Or it could be events, like I host this, I convene this event, I've attended this event, I finance this event. So you can have differential connections to nodes that don't have agency.
Right.
So
Okay.
just that's on the horizon.
Another idea that I had in my mind, and I don't know how viable this is anymore, but a few years ago, I was experimenting with social media bots. And so if you had people who says, I'm interested in meeting somebody, there should be some way of setting up a social media bot that says, hey, send this person an email because this person said that. But that's a little bit more involved.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's in our sort of someday list. So I just want to,
I see we have someone new who just joined the call, Roman. Welcome.
You'll need to unlock
is-
your iPhone first.
This is my wife's profile. She used my, hello, I'm Sean.
welcome.
We're in Hawaii and we just got back from San Diego, so I'm all over the place. But good morning, everybody.
Welcome. Good morning. So we've sort of, Ben has shown his map and we're in the question and answer phase. And just so since you've just shown up, I also wanted to ask, so I, like you and Mauricio both haven't had a full opportunity to express your questions or reasons for being here yet. So Mauricio, I was thinking if you wanted to text like whatever, like burning questions you have or something you need from us, since if your mic isn't working, if it's working, go ahead. And then I just want to ask you the same thing, Sean, but I'd like to give Mauricio that chance first if he wants it. Not to call you out, but just to give you a space if you want it, and you can ignore it. So Mauricio, I'm looking in the chat just to see if there's anything from you. Okay, should we have, yeah, okay, Sean, you could go ahead. Well, Mauricio.
Certainly. Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I'm definitely here, yeah, to just learn through diffusion. I've seen these emails come through and I've always wanted to come. It's just the time that's been difficult. And I've messed around with Kumu and I've definitely see value in kind of mapping my own social network. I've just been primarily doing that through Airtable and trying to just track folks in my own social network, mostly in, just different social justice circles I'm in, and just trying to see a point where I can more apply these tools, but I'm still very early on in the process and trying to see if I even need to go through the mapping phase or just collect my own kind of CRM and just leave it at there, because I'm still trying to figure out how I could kind of apply these tools. So
Got it. That's useful. Does anybody have feel like you have thoughts to share with Sean about that? Any experienced mappers who?
I think one key question is, how much is this a map for your own personal use versus something that you want to use to engage with others and help build a network or a community, right? Which I think is the use case really that sumApp was designed for, particularly because it allows everybody on the map to enter their own information. So you have all these different connections people can show that are validated, as well as their own information about themselves, versus all the data having to be centrally, inputted and managed. So that's a real huge distinction that makes it so powerful.
yeah, I definitely noticed that distinction. I think, yeah, I know I thought about like using that, and I don't really have a community that I had in mind, but I think I was more so just trying to like learn the basics. So if I did put out a survey or did go through all the technical process, I knew how to explain it or set it up. But I for sure recognize the centralized kind of way I was explaining this personalized database. But yeah, definitely just trying to learn at this point.
I mean, it still can be a really great way to visualize the data.
Just using an Airtable type data set.
Yeah,
You mean?
right. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need, right.
Yeah.
I have something I wanted to share going back to Brian's question quickly, if I could, about, this is from the Now What map. I know we're technically looking at a different map, but here was a way I was using the dual elements feature in sumApp. So we're mapping both people and other things, but instead of limiting those other things to just being organizations, you've got three different types of things that are mapped here. And, so in the survey for the entities, we called them, you could indicate what kind of an entity this was, and then they show up as color coded, and when you look at the information, you can tell what that is. And I think we may have had different connection types even for each of these two. So even though there's technically two tables of types of elements, you can sort of hack it to map more than two sorts of things.
Use shadow around it to tell you to differentiate between different things. That's real smart.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that a comment. I put it in the chat, but I think it's an important network thing that happens within networks, which is, structural balances. Friends of friends are likely to be friends. Well, also, instead of the focus being friends, the focus can be ideas or beliefs or activities, so that people that are attracted to a particular focus are often likely to develop a positive relationship because of that. So if you're trying to build density and connectivity and relationship, you can highlight ideas, purposes, intentions, identities, activities, and then do triadic closure around that, get people to connect around it. And it's called focus theory, and there is it can follow the same rules as structural balance, and you tend to get clustering separated by negative, by difference. You tend to get clustering around the ideas and things, Trumpism, and and if you can see that in your maps, if you create your maps that way and you see those differences, there's a tendency, the ability to work with that, do something with those differences.
Very interesting.
You just broke up.
Oh,
Right.
that sounds very interesting.
Yeah. I just want to comment, Sean. I don't feel like you have to just feel welcome. And if you continue to be curious, just feel welcome to continue to show up. And there are a number of people in this community who, show up repeatedly and have never made a map. So, but they feel like they're getting something about both, community building and network weaving, as well as mapping, and it's helping them because they have a sense that someday they're probably going to need this. And it's also, and then we've also sort of, you feel connected and you know who to call on for help when you get there. So feel free to not have to show up, even if you don't have any inkling of, what's going on at any given moment, and just feel free to show up and ask questions and jump in. So just want to welcome you. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. I feel welcome. Appreciate it.
Good. Mauricio, I'm there you are.
Hi everyone. Sorry to join late. Well, I have a couple questions to all of you, I guess. One is I was engaging with one of the governments I get to consult with, the environmental ministry, and I was showing this to showcase some value networks, so processes they are embarking and how to see and sense the internal dynamics of that. and someone came up like, hey, this is a directory. Like, what above a directory this is? Like, and I was like, well, you can see and sense the connections you're having, the weaving from sub-ministries of perhaps projects and how those articulate. But how to go beyond that? Like, it didn't connect. Or perhaps I am in my early phase of really understanding the depth of this, and I couldn't articulate my process of, like, it is way beyond that, because I see value, but I'm kind of a system thinker, and a lot of people are not. So if anyone can point into like sorts of that direction.
It's a question we all share, so we all struggle with.
So Marisa, just to see if I understand, the perception was that the network graph did not add new insight because they already knew who was involved.
Yep.
One immediate thought that comes to my mind is the evidence that most people misestimate each other's relationships, and that one of the values of a whole network graph is accuracy, that we tend to think we know the networks in which we're embedded, but we actually don't. We think people work together who don't really work together, or trust each other who don't really trust each other. And so that's one thing that comes to my mind is simply the validation of that information yields a very different understanding of the system capacity.
Right, thank you. And so if we come into the working together, into the trust in each other, those are different set of questions, or are different, as Ben was saying, subgroups, or when designing the questionnaire, I guess, the survey. So that would come into different scene patterns.
Oh, Jim, you want to say something? Go.
Just to that point, Mauricio, that if you've got an idea, or if your community has an idea about what relationships are important for their purpose, if they have a theory of change about what it takes to move from here to there, then they can design those questions, multiple sets of questions, because each question creates a different network, right? So if you can figure out what's important, then you can go ahead and pitch your questions, your relationship questions, to see that. But I also wanted to add on to what Rebecca was saying, that beyond the visual directory, which everybody gets right away, are these other things that, knowing about each other that you get through the survey, both relationally and also human capital wise. If the network is so small that everybody really knows each other, then it's, that's one thing. But very quickly, you get 30 people, and there's just a lot, as Rebecca says, that you're overestimating what we know about each other. And so size makes a difference. If you're working in Ben's networks where he has 300 people, there's like no way, to really know who your people are along all these different attributes, whether it's human capital or whether it's relational. So having a tool like this is a way, but yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I mean, maybe this is obvious to your point a second ago, Jim, but even as a directory, it's pretty cool, to be able to visualize it, partly like who's in the middle and who's most connected. I didn't show this in my demo before, but when people were setting up their profile, they identified different roles, so you can easily filter and just show me all the people who identify as media makers or journalists, and there they are. And so, and then within any given profile, there's a lot that you can collect, and you can search on that by keyword, etc. So it's a super powerful directory just in and of itself. I to say that that's not a reason to use the tool, to me, misses how valuable it is just even at that basic level.
Yeah.
And there's much more that's possible, to Jim's point and Rebecca's earlier.
And I'm just thinking, Mauricio, this is what you're talking about is sort of a fundamental question for for all of us as mappers, because I've been doing this kind of mapping longer than anybody, and it's still a constant challenge for me, where people will say, well, we already know everybody, or what is that going to give us besides a directory, and we can have a much cheaper directory. So I still get it, and I still feel tongue-tied and kind of like, I don't know what to say to that. But so just a couple thoughts I was having is, this is partly what, when we do in our sense making sessions on the first Mondays, when we're applying human systems dynamics lenses to a map, this is helping us begin to see a deeper value, like as mappers, helping us begin the practice of sense making with maps ourselves, so that we can communicate that and teach that to our networks, so that our networks are starting to get a complexity lens, as well as whatever it is, the system change they're trying to affect. So that's part of that discussion, is how do we make this meaningful to groups of people. Also, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of the network horizon. So when people say we know everybody, they're basically saying there's nothing beyond my horizon that's worth knowing or that's interesting. And so I've been sort of thinking about that for a long time, came across that label, which sort of gave me an anchor to start to write about. And so we'll continue to be exploring that, which I think is a helpful piece for all of us in starting to understand I don't think we understand, it's clear to me that human beings, we've not been able to see beyond the network horizon. We've never had the tools to see beyond our own personal network horizons. And to grow, to move beyond our network horizons historically has meant taking a lot of time, because we have to ask who knows somebody that would be helpful to me, and who, and then we have to build relationships, and we have to build trust. And so there's this either a lot of time, or there's just too much to know. And so our brains sort of shut down and stay in the groups that we're familiar with. And one of the things that I realize is different about how I think about relationships, having been doing this kind of mapping as long as I have, is I now have a sense of how to be strategic about who I need to connect with. So I don't just connect with everybody in a network. I don't need to do speed networking, meet 20 people, in an hour, most of whom I'm not gonna, I don't need at the moment. I don't have a reason to get to know them at the moment. But if I can see them on a map and see, oh, these two have been hovering around these ideas, and they're connected to these particular people, and they have been in these places, then I can say, oh, I see people who are interested, who I can connect much more strategically around, and not only in the moment, but long term. So today, I might not need to know you better, but I might realize, 6 months from now, I might go, oh, Sean talked about X and Y, and I know he's part of, we've got some things in common for this and that reason. Now I want to reach out to him, but I'm not going to remember that. There's no way I can contain in my head everything there is to contain about all the people that I come across in all the networks. And so having access to these different maps gives me a whole lot of strategic leverage about connections that I would not have in any other way. I could spend all day, every day meeting hundreds of people, but I would not have that capacity to keep it all and come back to it in the future to leverage it strategically. So I just went on a rant. That was my yeah. Mauricio, is there more in there that because we don't get to see you as often as we see each other, so I'm just wondering if there's.
No, that was great. Thank you very much. And the second process was on Ben's herding or weaving, that it's the behavioral process of updating the maps. That's a sense I get. Like, yeah, I know, herding people to update, and as it happened in the TSMA map, like, I know how many emails you guys send, but it's like 3, 4, 5, and I don't get to see well, we get to see a lot of change, but as someone was explaining here, it's a tenth or a fraction of what is actually happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, this has been really valuable and lots of insights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So someday, hopefully, we will have pushed the technology to the point where it's a phone app and we can just ping people when somebody says they want to connect to them. I have an aversion to algorithms suggesting people to meet one another, because I feel like what we need to be doing is meeting across differences, not, and I also have an aversion to like artificial intelligence just telling you who you should meet, because I think that should be a strategic understanding of complexity that we should be imparting to people, and not dumbing them down even further by doing that complexity thinking for them. But if there were ways, if there were some more ways to engage people with an app, I think that would help, but we're not there yet. So, and you're right, Ben. I'm always saying, like, sometimes I get people who are like, can we embed it? And we want, like, they want this whole perfect system. And I'm like, no. And then they're like, well, and I'm like, do you want a social system app or don't you? Like, do you see the value in this on its own, even if there's a little bit of friction? Or is it like, you will only have it if it's totally frictionless, because there isn't another tool that will do this. And you're basically saying you prefer frictionlessness to actually making change. So, so I don't feel like super like we have to make it totally frictionless, but I do agree that, you know, there are some friction barriers in people's minds that if they were actually into it, it would make it, it wouldn't be quite so daunting to them. I went on a couple of rants. I'm going to shut up now. Sean, is there anything just in your, so let me just, I'm gonna just frame up what's coming next. Our formal session goes for an hour. This has not been very formal, but nonetheless, the intention is to go for an hour, and then whoever needs to jump off at the top of the hour, we all say goodbye at the top of the hour, so we'll stop. And I will stick around, and often others stick around just for more informal conversation. If you need to jump off at the top of the hour, I want anyone who needs to jump off at the top of the hour and has some burning last minute thing they need to bring up. This is the place for that.
Yeah, I'm good on my end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Joe's jumping off. Do you want to say any last thing? Should we do our jumping off now then? Or I will let you say the last thing and then.
Just that every time I join these conversations, I'm walking away with like different lens in the way of, especially from trust and relationship building and that intentional work for people to come together to work, and also getting clarity as to who are the people I really want to work with, right? Like, I don't want to work with people who believe in change in a frictionless environment, because that's not where change happens. So just naming it, right? Like, why do I want to spend energy teaching them about change instead of actually making the change, right? So I'm walking with a lot of inspiration in how and where I want to approach social systems design and mapping in the first place.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will explain so we have a goodbye ritual, which is we all, if we're jumping, everybody, whether you're jumping off now or not, we're acknowledging that some people are going. And so we're doing some formal closure, which is we all unmute. And then I count down from 3 to 1. And when I get to 1, we just all give each other our blessings and our love and our greetings for the rest of the day or the evening. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then if you need to jump off now, feel free to jump off after that. And if you want to stick around and chat some more, we'll do that. I'll still be here. So you decide. So let's all unmute and we'll 3, 2, 1. Love you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Be the rock stars of change.
Bye.